Welcome to my mini lecture. If you have taken NR308 Fire Society from me in the last, I don't even know, 5 or 6 years, you would have seen this presentation. I changed it up a little bit, but this is for the 50 or so of you that encouraged me to start teaching about this a little bit on social media. The 3 of you who voted no, Ethan, Sean, and Austin, you know who you are. I trust that you will turn this off right now. Okay, so we're going to start our story here in 2003. This was an amazing fire season. You can see it was in mostly Southern California, and this fire season featured the Cedar Fire, which we are going to come back to. But what you see from these amazing NASA JPL images is that the smoke is overwhelmingly going out over the ocean. That is from our Diablo winds in the fall. So in 2 weeks, in October and November, for over 700,000 acres burned, almost 5,000 homes were destroyed, 21 people died, and 1 firefighter. So this was an amazing, huge fire season. I was working at Cal Fire in San Luis Obispo at this time. We did have a fire here. Thank God it was small on the grade. I believe it was started by a vehicle. So what I'm going to ask you is, was this preventable? In 2003, we had a lot of science. We had GIS. We have amazing training programs. We have fire science and forestry schools. We have decades of research laboratories all over the world looking at forestry, fire. What is going on here? Okay, so this was just a crazy one-off fire season. I'll never forget some of the Cal Fire chiefs I worked for at the time came back and they said, if I can put the slide, we got to write this down. This was, they called it the fire siege at this point of 2003. And they didn't even give it really a title. It's just the story. I have an actual PDF of this in my office here. And they ran ahead and did it. And what this is, it's a slim kind of spiral bound PDF where they went through each day and they looked at the major resources, what was committed as far as engines and air tankers, the number of crews, how many acres had burned, some quotes kind of on the left bar. You get it. Human factors, damage assessment, community impacts. You can find this online. I think it's in the Library of Congress now. Here's another day, gets a little hairier. 736,000 acres burned by October 30th. It was a very strange year. So they went through and made this whole thing. They thought, wow, that was a crazy banner year. Nothing has ever happened like this before. Whew. And then it happened again a few years later. Was this preventable? Because we learned a lot from the 2003 fire siege. Same thing happened in 2015. We had one of our most destructive seasons ever. Here locally in San Luis Obispo and in Monterey County, we had the Soberanes fire. We think the smoke is bad now. It gets really old after that many months. Preventable? 2017. Preventable? 2018. Oof. Mendocino Complex. The Woolsey and Hill fires. Terrible. 98 people died and 6 firefighters. Was this preventable? Okay, let's take a look at this a little bit. So CAL FIRE puts together these top 20 for the largest, top 20 for the most destructive, and the top 20 for the deadliest fires. We're just going to look at the largest, so we're just looking at acreage. So I put this wood grain on the top just so we can take a look at it. I started working for CAL FIRE in 1998. Is that right? Yeah, wow. And until that time, the largest fire we had for a long time, decades, many decades, like 70 years, was the Matilija fire in Ventura. 220,000 acres, no structures, no deaths. It was a long time ago, but it was a really big fire. There we go, 220,000 acres. So all of a sudden in 2003, with that fire siege, oh my gosh, the Cedar Fire passed this old Ventura fire. Wow, that is a big fire, 273,000 acres. Yikes. And I just was like, wow, that is like, we talked about that a lot. And then the Thomas fire happened just 12 years later. Excuse me if you heard me hiccup. But again, 281,000 acres, not that much bigger than the Cedar, less than 9,000 acres more. But oof, that was a terrible fire. And of course, the mudslide that followed it was equally tragic, really. More so. Oh my gosh. And then just the next year, the Mendocino Complex fire blew it all out of the water. Whoops, out of the water. From 281,000 acres, the largest one, to 400 and almost 60,000 acres. Just outstanding. And at the time, I had a really difficult time wrapping my head around how it took us 70 years to pass this benchmark. And then it took another 14 years to pass it again. And then just 1 year later, it was truly exponential. So let's break this down a different way. These are the fires right now. This is published in 2019. These were the fires that were for the past 5 years. 25% of the largest wildfires in California were in the last 5 years. These are the last 20 years, 75%. What does that leave us with? Oh yeah, we got the good old 1932 Ventura fire. We got a couple in the 70s. One lost a bunch of homes in San Diego. That was terrible, terrible fire, 1970 Laguna. We got one in the 80s, one in the 90s. So we went from like one every few decades, couple in the 70s, one in the 80s, one in the 90s, and now boom, 75% of them in the last 20 years. So let's look at this in a different way. Now, this fire season, we have 2 new fires to put on this list. So we're dropping off the 2 lower ones. Now we have the Lightning Complex up in Lake Napa unit. Clocking in today, this is, what's today's date? Monday, August 28th and 24th, excuse me, in the afternoon. About 35,000 acres. The last I just read, it is 20-ish% contained. 871 structures have been lost, and it's still a red flag warning. And then we also have burning right now the SCU Lightning Complex, which is pretty much the same size, but both of these are coming in above the Thomas fire as far as size already. This fire is only 10% contained, the SCU Lightning. So now if we kind of redo our stats a little bit, 35% instead of 25% of them are in the previous 5 years of, again, the 20 largest wildfires in California history. 85% of them are in the last 20 years. I'm hoping that it becomes obvious to you that this is not normal. So I started teaching this class in, I think it's 2006. It might have been 2007. Cal Fire wasn't creating these tables back then. So I just tried to recreate it using Wikipedia. I could have gone to GIS and taken a little bit longer and really filled it out, but this is what I found in just a few minutes. And actually, CAL FIRE has really great data, pretty accurate data of all of the large fires going back to almost the turn of the century, in some cases into the late 1800s. So this over 100,000 acres is what we call a mega fire. I'm going to start taking tabs or guesses, I guess, bets on what they're going to call the super mega wicked fires. I don't know. They're like losing superlatives. So here it is. This is when I first started teaching this class, Fire and Society, in 2006. The Cedar Fire had happened a few years earlier. Whoa, that was huge. That was a bananas fire. We had a McNally fire. in Tulare County, and that was pretty much it for the previous 5 years. So here you can see again Armatillaha, couple fires in the 70s, one in the 80s, couple in the 80s, couple in the 90s. Nothing like we have today. So thank you for coming to my social media TED Talk. More to come tomorrow.